What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Round Two podcast. I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and I am super excited to have a guest with me today. His name is Mark Hand. He is an entrepreneur, and we know each other because we both are graduates of the Sacramento Entrepreneurship Academy. That said, I don't know the ins and outs of all of his story, how he decided to become an entrepreneur. So I'm going to be learning his story as he is telling it. So I'm really excited to let him get going. So Mark, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Nikki. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell me, what is your business and how did you get going in that?
Oh, great question. So we have two businesses. Our core business is a company called Classic Fence,
Hmm.
and it's predominantly a residential fence installation business located in Sacramento. And then
Okay.
most recently, bought into or acquired ownership in a metal fence post company called Z Post. So two separate
Okay.
companies,
Uh-huh.
but there's definitely synergy between them. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Okay. So now tell
Yeah.
me something. Are you sitting inside or outside? Because I see a fence in the background. And when you first joined, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? But
Sure,
this all
sure.
makes sense.
Yeah, it's about 105 outside. So no,
Yeah,
I'm
I was gonna
actually
say, I
in.
don't think you're outside.
No, I'm actually in the Z Post little showroom that we have. A little bit quieter on this side rather than at the Classic Fence side, where there's a lot more noise and forklifts and those type of things. So just
Okay,
a little
okay.
indoor showroom.
Nice, nice. So how did you get into the fence business?
Yeah, it was actually quite random. So it happened coming right out of college. Post
Okay.
SEA. I had done some work for the Sacramento Angels while in college and had offers to go to the Bay Area. My
Hmm.
wife was a pediatric nurse and she loved her job in Sacramento. And I said, absolutely, I can't move, right? She loves her
Hmm.
job. We'll go ahead and stay here. And just by happenstance, I had gone back to my high school. I went to Jesuit. So I went back to the
Okay.
high school to kind of help fundraise for the robotics program, which I had started while at Jesuit.
Oh, cool.
And one of the young men there said, hey, my dad's looking to hire somebody to help kind of turn around things at the business. And I ended up meeting him, said, hey, sure, I'll stay for 2 months, kind of help you turn it around, see kind of operationally what's going on. But I'm
Hmm.
not interested. And it ended up staying 2 years.
Okay.
And so I
Instead of
kind of got
something
the
that
hooks.
always ends up working out, right?
It, it is. So the hooks were there.
Uh-huh.
We ended up turning things in the right direction, became profitable, expanded the business. And at the end of the day, we just didn't see eye to eye on maybe how to treat people, and everybody
Okay.
has a different opinion on that.
Sure.
Not with me, I was well respected, but I guess looking at the labor pool, right? Looking at blue collar as more of a commodity than as a human, and
Oh, okay.
that's
Fair.
where I struggled. And
Hmm.
for me, I look at the humanity of a person and just said, you know
Hmm.
what? If this is the way the industry is, I don't want to do it anymore, right?
Sure.
I'll go back to something, in the tech field or call, somebody and figure out a new thing to do.
Hmm.
And so I ended up actually getting a call from a buddy right away that said, hey, would you help me, flip some houses, remodel, do those things,
Uh-huh.
as we all did during that time, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
or many of us. So I ended up doing that. Ended up having two partners, and kind of diving into the operations and expenses. I found some things that were like, hey guys, we should tighten this up here and there, and
Uh-huh.
they weren't used to operating maybe a little bit more specifically for the business. And
Hmm.
so we decided, hey, not best for me to stick around because I'm looking at this as a business, not as a lifestyle.
Hmm.
And so ended up being great. I got paid for the next several months and got to know my wife again. So
Hmm.
we were took 6 months off. Said, hey, who are you? Hi,
Wow.
how are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
And that was great. And then while doing that, it just so happened that I was at my brother's wedding in Italy. His wife is Florentine, so from
Uh-huh.
not on this side. And we were actually there, got a call and said, hey, when you're going to start a business, I'm going to come work for you. And I had this call about every 6 months for the last 2 years from one of the ex-employees from where I was working. And I said,
Oh,
absolutely
okay.
not. I think in a moment of weakness, I said, sure, when I get back, I'll start a business, but just for you and your helper.
Uh-huh.
And so got back, ended up starting the fence business,
Okay.
and now we're 20 something employees and the number one rated fence company in Sacramento.
Wow, that is amazing. So, how big is your service area?
So we only go about 10 to 15-mile radius. So we really keep it
Really?
tight.
Okay.
And we took a different approach when we started. We really said, hey, a lot of times there's a race to the bottom, right? Right. You cut corners, you do things in contracting, and we said, hey, let's look at quality and craftsmanship, and let's center our
Mm-hmm.
business around that.
Mm-hmm.
We look at it and we say, hey, building better lives through quality fencing, right? That's for our
Hmm.
guys, our gals, and for our customers.
Uh-huh.
And so we said, let's go ahead and do that. And so we really focused on it. And I think when everybody else was racing to the bottom or trying to compete on price, we
Mm-hmm.
were able to bring value to the customer. And we've really developed a great customer base, 10 to 15 miles from here. And that allows us to service our people really, really well, right? So when something does come up, because it always does,
Mm-hmm.
we're not driving 2 or 3 hours like a lot of
Sure.
other companies do to service that problem. So we're more efficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our guys and gals really enjoy that we work locally.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, gosh, 10 to 15, that's not that big of an
Mm-mm.
area. I mean, given that Sacramento is
No,
as spread out as it is.
sure, sure. So I'd say if people know the area, from basically Davis to Elk Grove to
Mm-hmm.
Rockland, right?
Okay.
We do go up to Auburn on occasion, but really the focus was to make sure that we are one of the companies of choice in our area.
Mm-hmm. So I
Hmm.
think about fences now, there's so many different types of materials to build a fence.
Sure.
Do you have all of those different options, or are you strictly like wood, as I see in the background, or
Sure.
what do people get to choose from? And I guess what are people choosing from?
Yeah, great question. So every company has kind of their sweet spot and their bread and butter. And early on, we
Hmm.
decided wood was going to be ours. And so we
Hmm.
teamed up with a lumber mill up in Ukiah,
Hmm.
and got wood cut specifically for what we're doing.
Hmm.
And again, when we talk about kind of those differences or those distinguishing factors, we're able to get a thicker fence board, a thicker 2x4, so
Okay.
customers are very easily able to see the value that we bring to them. So we do
Got it.
focus on wood. And then we went out and we said, okay, what other products are in the market that maybe aren't being offered
Hmm.
or that would provide some interest to our customers? And so we went out, we found aluminum fencing in Florida. We went out and found a polyethylene fence up in Utah. And so we're the distributor for those locally. And so we're able to maybe provide the customer something a little bit different than what
Hmm.
our competition generally does. And then we focused on residential. So instead of
Yeah.
going out and doing commercial and residential and all the other in betweens, we just said, hey, let's really focus on developing a great residential application, and that's what we've done.
Okay. So with a wood fence, I know that there's like either staining or painting that
Hmm.
comes along with that. Is
Sure.
that a part of your service, or do you have other subcontractors that you would refer out for those types of things?
Sure. So we used to do quite a bit of it, had all the setups, and as you go through businesses, you kind of iterate over time.
Hmm.
But about 5 years ago or so, the California State License Board said, hey guys, if you are staining and painting fences and you are a fencer, we'd prefer it was a painter, a painting
Hmm.
contractor. And so we technically shouldn't be doing it. And so we said, hey, you know what? We're not going to, right? We're going to try
Hmm.
to abide by the letter of the law and as best we can.
Hmm.
And so we went ahead and stopped doing that and then started referring it out, right? And
Hmm.
so we don't subcontract it. In my experience, I don't like managing other people's quality of
Yeah.
product. And
Hmm.
so we provide our customers with referrals and say, hey, you make the educated choice. Here's a few, people that our customers have had success with.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when we're done, we want that customer to be fully satisfied and make sure that's where our commitment to making sure that satisfaction stops. And then whoever
Hmm.
takes it from there should do the same.
Yeah. I think that I actually like that. And I think that's smart because if you think about just construction in general, I mean, how many times have you heard from somebody who had something built and they're like, oh, the general was great, but then the plumbers came in and they messed this, that, or the
Yes,
other up. And I wouldn't have used those plumbers, but I had to use what the
sure,
general had and all those types of
sure.
things. So,
It can get complicated.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So, okay, so I know from a construction perspective, right,
Hmm.
that there's even in this neighborhood that I live in one of the first houses that was built in my little community.
Hmm.
Um, as the community grew, they changed the models that were available for
Hmm.
people to choose from. And as of course, with all new construction, there's little things that go on here and there. So as they were building out the balance of the community, there were little things that happened. And so there was also project managers that were still roaming around. So a lot of us that had been here, we had the luxury of being able
Sure.
to call someone and say, hey, like this is broken, or can you come help
Sure.
me with this? And one day, one of the guys was over here fixing something, and he made a comment to me. He said, "Wow, you're really lucky that you have one of the original, models, because the quality of materials for this kind of last phase of the
Hmm.
development isn't as nice as what you got here."
Hmm. Hmm.
So I can only imagine, or I know for a fact that when you have like higher quality materials, it's higher costs, and then higher costs have to
Sure.
get passed to customers.
Sure.
So, how do you manage that aspect of it when you
Hmm.
know you're being bid against other
Sure.
companies?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of things that we consider. So one is there is value in better material, right? And
Hmm.
so if we can educate the customer and say, hey, this is what we're providing, this is why we're providing it, and this is why we think it's the best fit for your situation,
Hmm.
right? There's going to always be somebody that's going to be less than you, right? But
Yeah.
generally, they can't compete with the quality of our materials. But what we've also done in the business side is we've leveraged technology and we've leveraged efficiency and processes and people
Hmm.
to make our operation more efficient. And so we don't
Okay.
necessarily have to be more expensive
Hmm.
because our operation is more efficient than say maybe most of our
Oh,
competitors.
fair.
And so we've implemented technology like the use of CRMs and automation and
Hmm.
the way that we warehouse our material,
Hmm.
which is not typically seen in our industry, allows for picking, packing, unloading, and loading more quickly and efficiently. We're able to allow our installers to focus on their installation rather than going to the dump because we brought the dumpsters to our facility,
Oh, okay. Got
right?
it. Yeah.
We have staff that unloads and loads those trucks. So we've really looked at each part of the process in the building, and I know fencing's relatively simple, but there's a
Hmm.
lot of pieces and components to it. And so we looked at each piece and part and said, okay, where can we be most efficient? Where does it make sense? Where does it bring value to the customer, and where does it make the job of the people doing the jobs
Hmm.
more pleasant, right? And
Hmm.
so we've really
Yeah.
tried to leverage that. Doesn't mean always without epic failure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think CRMs are finally at the point where, they become a little bit more user friendly, right? You're not
Hmm.
having to hire people to implement it as much
Sure.
as you used to be. The coding's got a lot simpler.
Hmm.
We went through, I think, 3 or 4 CRMs before we found one that actually had the fit and function that they promised.
Okay.
And so,
That's good.
we've had to iterate. Yeah.
No, I like what you say about efficiency is not only for, your customer's sake, but also for your employees' sake. I think that
Hmm.
that's so important. I mean, I
Sure.
remember at the last job that I had asking the team one day about certain internal processes that we had, and I
Hmm.
remember saying like, why are we doing this? And they're like, well, we've
Yeah.
always done that. And I said, well, who's it
Yeah.
benefiting? Is it benefiting our customers, or is this just like
Sure.
something put in place for whatever reason, but all
Hmm.
it seems to do is stress you guys out. And so then we
Yeah.
just stopped doing it. And they were like, oh my God, this is so much better.
So
And I thought,
nice.
well,
Yeah.
great. Like, let's see what else we
Yeah.
can make more efficient for you guys. We want it to be easier
Absolutely.
for you. So then you're offering a better service. So,
Sure.
okay, so tell me more. I'm starting to really think about all these fences. So how many
Sure.
fences do you guys do on an annual basis?
So we do about 1,200. So we do
1,200.
about
Okay.
1,200. So if you imagine every yard has typically 3 to 5 neighbors.
Uh-huh.
And so we have about 1,200 unique projects. So that
Okay.
unique project could be 3 sides of a fence for one person. So some
Yeah.
people would look at that as 3 individual jobs. We don't, right? We look at it as one.
Okay.
But it's, if you had to kind of just think, I'm driving down the road, how much fence is that? If you think about a semi to a semi and a half of material a week, that's about what we
Okay.
go through.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you ever get stuck in the middle of, because I remember at the first house that I bought, there was a fencing issue,
Hmm.
and but it was a fence that was shared with our neighbors. So do
Sure.
you ever, and so we went and talked to them and said like, hey, we want to have this fence replaced. Like, do you guys
Hmm.
want to chip in? This is like the quote we got. This is how much. Do you
Yeah.
ever get stuck in the middle of those types of things
Oh, yeah.
with the people?
Absolutely. It's we try not to, right? We
Yeah.
absolutely try our best not to get in between neighbors. At the end of the day, right? Very few people want to discuss money, and we
Hmm.
do live in California, and very few people know their neighbors, which
Mm,
is which is
weird.
interesting, right? Kind
Yeah.
of odd.
Yeah.
Um, so for us, we've developed some tools and some things that help with that conversation. We came up with videos that explain the process. And so if,
Hmm.
let's say, Nikki, you came to me and you said, hey, I'd like an estimate, your neighbor wasn't available or wasn't there's resources that you can send to them that at least let them know, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. This
Hmm.
is what the fencing process takes. And then we came up with things like split invoice forms that says, hey,
Mm, okay.
Nikki, you're responsible for half, your neighbor's responsible for half. We'll bill you individually. And so we
Hmm.
really tried to take the pressure off of, one neighbor versus the other, which is really smooth that over. Now,
Hmm.
people are people, right?
Yeah.
And I think post COVID have gotten more interesting.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think customers generally understand that we're here to do the right thing. We're here to give them a good product. And if we stay positive through the process, most of the times neighbors will at least be amicable to it being done,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a constant thing, and we're constantly trying to develop tools and resources to send out to everybody to just say, hey, these are the expectations to have. This is what we're going to do. We'll be in and out. This is the timeline, and I
Hmm.
think that's helped kind of smooth over, the conversation between neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's so interesting because you could also, I'm sure you've had instances too where the fence maybe in and of itself is fine, but maybe one
Hmm.
person wants it to be better,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then the other neighbor could be like, well, it's fine, but
Hmm.
so that's
Yeah.
interesting. So is there seasonality to your business?
So for ours, being in Sacramento, we're pretty lucky, right? We're blessed
Hmm.
that our weather is generally pretty darn good.
Hmm.
So for us, we're pretty constantly busy throughout the year. I would say that
Okay.
there's a bit of a slowdown in the latter end of the year when the holidays hit, right?
Hmm.
November and
Yeah.
December, Thanksgiving and Christmas into the New Year's. Um, but we, have been real lucky and blessed the last 10 years. We've stayed fully busy throughout the year, every single year.
That's
So
great.
we don't really have a downtime. Now, that's not indicative of maybe the other parts in the country, right? If you have snowpack or you have
Right.
things that preclude you from doing it, then
Hmm.
then not. But here we're real lucky that we can focus on our business being just fencing, not fencing and snow removal or fencing
Right.
and this.
Right.
We do just fencing and we're able to stay busy, right? And we've also modified the calendar a little bit to make sure that in those times when our customers maybe have a little bit less demand, we're allowing our employees to take time with their families. So at Christmas, we always take a week
Hmm.
and a half off,
That's
always.
nice.
If the and usually at that time we're still booked out several months,
Hmm.
but we think that it's important for our employees to have the time with their family, just like I
Yeah.
want to, right? If I
Total,
want to be
right?
home, they want to be home too.
Exactly.
And so, we've done that, and so allowed us to have a little bit more flexibility too, right? The push and the pull. Hey, instead
Hmm.
of maybe a week and a half, let's do two, or
Sure.
hey, instead of a week and a half, let's do a week and a couple of days.
Hmm.
Um, but but outside of that, no, we've been real lucky that our climate allows for full-time building.
Yeah, that's great. Now, what's the average lifespan of a fence? Like, how often are people
Sure.
replacing fences?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the past, it was probably every 30 or 40 years, right?
Oh,
And
dang.
part of that, yeah, and part of that is because we used to cut old growth trees, right? So we used to
Okay.
cut trees that were 3, 4, 500 years old. So they had
Hmm.
built up a lot of tannic acids in them. They have a lot of rigidity to them. They're very dense.
Hmm.
Over the last maybe 30 or 40 years, farming is really, or fencing and fencing material has really become a farming operation,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And so
Hmm.
they have 100-year growth plans for trees. And so now they're cutting second, third generation trees, growing them really fast.
Got it.
Maybe
Okay.
they're 30 or 40 or 50 years old. They're not 400 years old. So
Yeah.
great for the environment, right? So
Hmm.
we've made it illegal to cut old growth redwoods and we've done things to protect the forest.
Hmm.
Bad for your fence, right? Because
Hmm.
in like we talked about earlier on
Yeah.
your house in the first phase versus second and third phase, the
Yeah.
quality of the material has decreased, right?
Uh-huh.
And so now we're seeing fences fail at year 8, year 10, year 12, year
Okay.
15. And that's where things like the metal fence posts the other business that we have
Hmm.
are saying, hey, let's get those numbers back up there, right? Because
Hmm.
fences generally fail at the posts first, right?
Oh,
So they
okay.
fail at where the
Hmm.
post makes contact with the ground, usually due to rot, right?
Uh-huh.
Or wind, right? We're
Hmm.
not in a super high wind area, but it
Hmm.
happens,
Yeah.
but generally due to rot. And
Hmm.
again, being in California, we've taken out all of the caustic chemicals out of things, out of the treatment process that made those
Oh,
posts
okay.
last.
Got
So
it.
we've taken out, the heavy metals, we've taken out the arsenic, we've taken out,
Hmm.
think of like railroad ties when we were younger, right? That
Hmm.
that smell of creosote, you don't
Yeah.
see that anymore, right? And
Okay.
that's a good thing environmentally, but it's a bad thing from the longevity of building materials. And so
Okay.
now there's a lot of opportunity on the metal fence post side because we're able
Hmm.
to say, hey, let's get those fences to last 20, 30, 40 years like they should and like they
Hmm.
used to. And let's do it in a way that doesn't break the bank, right?
Hmm.
Because replacing a fence every 10 years is just ridiculous, right? It's too
Yeah.
expensive to do that.
Yeah.
And so, what we've done on the classic fence side is we give our customers options, right? We say,
Hmm.
hey, here's a bid for a pressure treated post, and here's what the difference would be if you chose metal. And so
Mm.
we take an education methodology behind our sales process, right? We don't look at, hey, if we came to Nikki's house, you need to sell Nikki, you need to get the signature and walk
Got
away.
it.
We don't do that.
Hmm.
We look at ourselves as a guest in your home. We're here to educate you so that when you're done, if you choose us or not, you make an educated decision, right?
Hmm.
And so I think because we approach it that way, our customers have a lot of faith
Hmm.
in that
Sure.
in us. They don't feel pressured to make the sale, but at the end of the day, we're probably the only one doing that in the sales process,
Hmm.
which now we have a higher level of trust with our customer, and we're more likely
Absolutely.
to make that sale. And so, you know, long-winded answer to how long does a fence last, but it really just depends now on the post choice.
No, but I think long-winded, not even. I mean, I think it's so good to hear that because in this day and age, all I feel like no, regardless of what business anybody
Hmm.
is in, there is such that focus on like the customer experience, right? You hear customer
Sure.
experience all the time, no matter what
Hmm.
industry. And I think people have got to the point where they're more and more people are more aware when they're trying to be sold on something
Hmm.
versus when
Sure.
they're just talking with somebody about whatever investment they're getting ready to make.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
I bought a car back in 2021, and one
Hmm.
of the reasons that I ended up buying it at the dealership that I did was because I felt like I was just having a conversation with the salesman, whereas when I had
Sure.
gone to another dealership, same brand of vehicle,
Hmm.
but when I had gone to the first dealership, I felt like I was talking with like a greasy salesman,
Sure.
and it
Sure.
didn't make me feel that he had my best interests
Hmm.
in mind, especially when making the purchase that I was getting ready to make. So I think that customers in general have become so much more aware and more savvy, and does boil down to that experience. And then especially in a like an investment, right? I mean, whether or
Hmm.
not you can argue like, oh, you need a fence. Well, you do need it, but it
Sure.
still is an investment in your home, and it
Sure.
helps with
Sure.
the aesthetics of your home and
Hmm.
the resale value of your home. All of those things, you still want to feel that you got, something that is what they said it was going to be.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then I'm sure it works great for you guys from a referral basis.
Absolutely. And just one thing that, as you're mentioning that in that sales process with the car dealer, and this is probably similar to what we do. What we found when we started is most people, most fence companies, most estimators, salespeople,
Hmm.
it's kind of a rushing, right? From one to the other. So you felt very time constricted, right? So they're trying to
Hmm.
get you hooked and sold, that kind of that sleaziness really quickly, right? And in
Hmm.
our industry, we saw that the average estimate was 10 to 15 minutes, right?
Okay.
So they're coming, they're measuring, they're telling you that they're going to give you the best customer service. They leave, they do it again and again and again throughout the day to try to get it based on volume, right?
Hmm.
Sales based on volume.
Sure.
So when we looked at it, we said, okay, what if we flipped that on its head and we said, let's give a customer 45 minutes to an hour. And
Hmm.
what we'll do is we'll give our estimators 2-hour time blocks. So if they run early or they run late, the next customer is still cared for within the 2-hour time frame.
Mm-hmm.
But while we're in your house and while we're being a good guest, we're able to take our time to answer, to look at things that maybe somebody else missed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what changed that sales process, right? So when you
Yeah,
sit down with
definitely.
somebody or you're standing at the fence line looking, when you don't feel pressured,
Yeah.
right, you're able to let your guard down and actually ask the questions that you want. Some of them
Right.
just about price, but also, hey, I'm interested in upgrading this. The last guy told me just to replace it just like it is,
Mm-hmm.
but I would like to explore that. And so we, just like you had mentioned with the person you purchased your car from, said, hey, let's pump the brakes. Let's give a little bit more time in the sales process.
Yeah.
Let's give time for value and conversation, relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, at the end of the day, that the product that we do provide is a product that they actually wanted, right?
Yeah.
Because we had the time to clearly understand what
Mm-hmm.
they're asking, and they had time to clearly understand what we're providing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really, I think, made a difference for us.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, okay, now that I feel like I'm an expert in all things fences, I was just
Yeah.
kidding.
The test is at the end.
Yeah, great. Hopefully it's multiple choice.
Uh,
Let's talk more about entrepreneurship. So you mentioned when we first were
sure.
kind of talking that you had somebody who had consistently reached out to you and said, "Hey, like when are you going to
Hmm.
start doing this? When are you going to start doing this?"
Sure.
Now,
Sure.
you and I both know just going and starting up a business is not for the faint of heart, right? It's not,
Sure.
there certainly
Absolutely.
was a lot of thought that went into it and organization
Hmm.
and trying to figure out, like,
Sure.
okay, how am I going to make this work? I'm going to go all in, whatever all of those thoughts processes were. So tell me a little
Sure.
bit about that. What made you make that ultimate decision that, like, yes, I want to give this a go?
Yeah. I can't say that I had 30 years of business experience or working for other people. I through the end of high school and college, I worked, right? And I worked multiple jobs at multiple different places, from physical therapy to a coffee shop to selling wine to you
Mm-hmm.
name it, right? Working for the Angels on at the end of that. And so what I did in each of those roles, and just I looked at it as if, hey, I'm going to try to be the best employee here, learn as much as possible, and provide value. And what I often found was I couldn't implement the things that I thought would really make a ton of change, right?
Okay.
Because
Mm-hmm.
things generally stayed the same way that they always had been, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like we had talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that there's a lot of opportunities, and there would have been a lot of different great businesses that I could have worked for and been successful at. But if I was going to be the kind of the master of my own destiny, or be able to say, hey, let's do this or let's not, I could only do it if I owned it, right? Or
Sure.
if I had some type of ownership in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to work hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I had seen through the different processes is working hard's great, but there's usually a ceiling to working hard, right? Because the owner
Yeah.
still may or may not see the value, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay, but it's still their business at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, hey, if we're going to do this, and if I'm taking what I learned in the places that I liked, and the way that I said I wouldn't treat people, let's actually make a place where we can build better lives for our employees. We call them family. So if I say family, it doesn't mean my brothers and sisters work with me.
Uh-huh.
That's actually what we call our employees.
No, that's
But
great.
so that we can have a business, right? We can have the benefits of owning a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both in decision making and hopefully financially, but also change the lives of those that work for us, and maybe make it a little bit different than what this industry is typically seeing,
Sure.
right? Where the blue collar industry doesn't typically have advancement, doesn't have opportunities for growth, doesn't have people stepping up the economic ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And we flipped that over the last 10 years, flipped it on its head in Sacramento. And our guys have 401ks, guys and gals, 401ks. They're buying houses. They're able to
That's
afford
awesome.
vehicles. Their kids are getting master's degrees. I've been to, several, citizenship ceremonies. And
Wow.
now we've shown that you can elevate the life of your staff
Mm-hmm.
in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and now we're seeing our competitions going, hey, let's do that too. And so really
Oh, that's cool.
we're elevating the way that, the industry treats employees, which is awesome. It's a ton of fun,
Yeah.
right? Ton of fun, not without its issues.
Sure.
But it's also difficult, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
we're doing something that traditionally hasn't been done, or that we were told couldn't be done.
Mm-hmm.
right? Offering a 401k to fence installers. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to
Yeah.
happen. How are you going
Yeah.
to pay for it? What we found was, yeah, it's expensive on occasion, right? When you do matching and we do these other things,
Mm-hmm.
but you're building loyalty, right? You're
Sure.
building a future, right? Now our employees can actually see a future. They go, wow, they open up their statement, you know, it's not just the work we do today, but you've invested in our future. You've invested in our life. And those employees want to see what the next year is going to hold and what the next year
Mm-hmm.
is going to hold and how we can continue to do that
Mm-hmm.
with them, which has been awesome.
Well, and it's so, I mean, I think that's one of the things is so important is the loyalty that you mentioned, right? Like you
Mhm.
want the cost of employee turnover is significant. And I mean, I don't think it matters what type of industry or what type of business you're
Mhm.
in. If you're, churning and
Sure.
burning through people, you're spending more time and effort getting people hired, trained,
Mhm.
onboarded, all of those different things. And
Mhm.
instead of, okay, maybe if we paid our people a little bit more, maybe if we
Yeah,
treated them a little bit better, maybe if we did these and like made them feel like, hey, we actually value you regardless of what your job. It's like that old saying, right? Like to
Mhm.
pay attention to how people treat people. You want to be friends with and surround yourself with people who treat the janitor the same way as they treat the CEO.
Absolutely.
And it's so
Absolutely.
true. So I think that's interesting. And I love seeing that you've been able to see your competitors kind of take your lead and say, wait a minute, these are good things and we should follow suit.
Sure. And it elevates the industry, right? So
Hmm.
instead of it being a race to the bottom, it's how can we build up our community, right? How
Hmm.
can we make sure that the people who work in Sacramento have a better life today than they did yesterday?
Hmm.
And I think that's hugely important. The other thing it's done for us, just from an employment standpoint, is you know, our industry is pretty notorious for people, hire, fire, leave, quit, get a dollar extra an hour over here, so you leave, and
Yeah.
we've effectively eliminated that. And
Okay.
and the 401k is not the only way, right? We were the
Hmm.
first company in Sacramento to offer a snack bar to our
Oh,
guys. So when
okay.
they come in the morning,
Uh-huh.
right, we have Gatorades and fresh fruit and power bars and
Hmm.
chips and goodies too, right? It's, cookies and everything else that
Yeah.
that people want. But why? Because if our guys' nutrition and gals' nutrition is taken care of, if they're
Hmm.
able to have snacks,
Hmm.
and they're more likely to feel good throughout the day, or at least feel
Absolutely.
taken care of,
Yeah.
right? And so we did things like that. We do team building,
Hmm.
so we pay the day off for our whole company. Actually, I think the end of this month we have it. We pay everybody's day off and we go do something together as a team. So we get
Yeah.
sales, we get the office, we get the warehouse, we get the installers, we get everybody together in the same room and actually spend time together, not separate, right? We
Hmm.
force everybody to be
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
and so we're able to build cohesion, right? And do something
Yeah.
that maybe people haven't experienced or been able to do themselves.
Hmm.
And so we actually, not just some sitting around a table talking, but we actually do,
Right.
you know,
Like an
activities,
activity.
which is great.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and I think that
Hmm.
makes it, I don't know. I think just the team cohesion overall, it's so important because then if somebody needs something from someone else, right? It's like,
Hmm.
hey, I lost this or I need to rush
Sure.
this material or whatever it may be. You
Absolutely.
have those relationships where it's not just, oh, wait, like who are you? Like I've never talked to you
Hmm.
before. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
regardless of company size. So
Sure.
that's
Sure.
great.
Yeah, definitely helps get rid of the silos, right? Not to say
Yeah.
that they don't exist, and sometimes they exist for a reason.
Hmm.
But at the same token, kind of allowing everybody to be on the same playing field at least several times a year, I think has really helped kind of
Hmm.
bring everybody together because it's hard, right?
Yeah.
The customers are hard. Digging holes is hard.
Yeah.
Pulling lumber is hard, right? And
Yeah.
so the day off and the ability for people just to be together, to have fun, to laugh, to eat,
Hmm.
has really been a huge thing for our business. And this morning we were all talking about, they're asking, okay, so where are we going? They
Oh,
always get a little
cool.
antsy
Yeah.
as we get closer. What are we doing? Where are we going? And it's a lot of fun.
That is fun. And I mean, that's a real testament to it that you've got people getting excited already and like kind of, hey, what are we doing?
Sure.
Where are we going? And they're not like dreading
Yeah.
it. Like, oh God, we have to do a
Yeah.
team builder. You know?
Yes. I hate boring events.
I
So
know,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So from an entrepreneurship perspective,
Hmm.
what originally made you go through SEA?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think back. So I helped start the entrepreneurship organization at Sac State.
Oh, okay.
And so through that process, I had met your dad, Jim,
Hmm.
and then Chris Chediak at Weintraub Tobin,
Okay.
and some of the and Chris Chediak's still our lawyer today, which is funny.
Awesome.
Um, and so, I think very quickly understood that. And then looking at maybe some of the classes and the education that was available
Hmm.
at Sac State,
Hmm.
it didn't quite align where kind of my heart was pulling, right?
Sure.
I said, okay, let's see how we can supplement this education
Hmm.
and look at another way, an effective way of doing it. Because as you know, as you're going through those college classes, very, very rarely is there a capstone that pulls them all together.
Right.
That's not just a rushed project, right?
Hmm.
As we all
Hmm.
know in
Yeah.
college, right? Let's spend the last 3 days doing a whole semester's worth of work.
Right.
And so so I looked at it as an opportunity maybe to get a different perspective and experience. And
Uh-huh.
also I think what really drew me was a perspective and experience by people who had actually done it,
Yeah.
right? And so often we see in education somebody who's been an educator without maybe the experience. And that's,
Sure.
in a lot of fields, that's okay, right?
Hmm.
Mathematics and science and in business, though, I think until you've taken bumps and bruises or
Hmm.
until you've figured out that your worst day is the worst day you've ever experienced, but tomorrow can add to that,
Hmm.
right? Until you've actually lived that,
Yeah.
you can't necessarily teach or educate on it. And so I looked at SEA as an opportunity to really learn from people who've done it, right? And
Hmm.
who had different, unique, and interesting experiences,
Hmm.
and that were maybe more accessible, right?
Yeah.
Because your teacher has office hours, but I could pick up the phone and say,
Yeah.
hey, Chris, I know you're busy. When you have time, I have a question on X.
Hmm.
And the mentors and the network at SEA, I still utilize today,
Yeah.
which I can't say is true of what I experienced education wise.
I totally can agree and relate to that. It's interesting, as I've gone on my own career path and
Hmm.
have so many, I call my mentor network and my eclectic network, because if I look out,
Sure.
I'm like, wow, I have so many people who have done so many different things and
Oh
been
yeah.
greatly successful at them. And but one of the consistent thing about all of them is that they're
Hmm.
all so willing to help out and so willing to share their advice and experience and
Hmm.
give you their time.
Hmm.
And I
Oh
think
yeah.
a lot of it really is directly related to what you just said about having been through it, having had those worst
Hmm.
days that, you wake up and you're like, oh shit, it just got worse, you
Oh
know?
yes. Had
Um,
a few of those. Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
then, going through it. And I mean, there's no better teacher than experience, and like, period.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, that's the fun and the terrifying part about what we do,
Hmm.
right? And it's at the end of the day, either, I say to our people, I experience higher highs and lower lows,
Hmm.
right? And the higher highs are a great time, but I also know those lower lows come, and having a
Hmm.
network that I can lean on, right?
Hmm.
SEA people, or a network that you develop outside that you can lean on and say, hey man, I'm going through this today.
Yeah.
What would you do? Or,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm going through it with you right now. And at least you have a support network.
Totally.
And I think I've had to learn that, right? For a long time, I said, no, I'm going to just do this myself, put my head down,
Hmm.
buckle down. And I think I was lucky enough to be surrounded by people who acted as guardrails for me,
Hmm.
right? And you look retrospectively and you go, thanks for nudging me that way. Or, hey, thanks for nudging me that way.
Yeah.
And now I've kind of looked up and go, okay, I have a network that I can leverage. Hey, before I do this or while I'm going through it at the early phases, let's make a few calls or send out a few text messages just to
Yeah.
bump some ideas quickly.
Totally.
And I think that's what SEA, shows you, and then you figure it out with time, right? You
Hmm.
figure it out with time.
No, I think I love that, because I mean, one of the things that I've done more recently is reach out to a person or two and just kind of say like, hey, like, keep me honest. Like, is the way that
Hmm.
I'm viewing this situation, is this
Sure.
like, am I just, am I ignorant to what's really going
Hmm.
on, or are my feelings valid and I am seeing it for what it is? Um,
Sure.
because my favorite thing is not being the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be. I
Yes.
want I
Yes.
want other people that I can look up to and learn from. But I
Hmm.
also do, value my own experience and my own
Sure.
accomplishments as
Hmm.
being able to look at different situations that I could be putting myself in. So I think having
Hmm.
those people, and I like how you call them guardrails. I'm going to start using that because that is
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting when you can look back and go, oh, is that one little thing that somebody said that
Hmm.
made me think about this just a tad differently? And now I'm
Oh.
like, even if you're going this way, it's just a little bit, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really important.
Absolutely.
So what would you say to an aspiring entrepreneur that possibly comes across this podcast? What advice would you give to someone who's
Sure.
debating going out on their own in this world?
Yeah. Don't listen to me. But no, I think do it, right? I think
Hmm.
absolutely do it, and do it sooner than you think you're ready to do it,
Hmm.
and do it when you have less things to lose,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? I think, I've been with my wife now, I think we're going on 19 years or
Uh-huh.
19 years, the end of this month. Uh, it was a lot easier when it was just us. As soon as we
Sure.
had kids, you start making decisions a little bit differently.
Uh-huh.
And I think everybody has a different tolerance for risk, right?
Yeah.
But it's not more than once we didn't know how we were going to make our mortgage payment, right?
Hmm.
It's not, we've had several, and that gets harder when you go, I can't make my mortgage and I have to buy milk,
Right.
right?
Right. Sure.
And so I think learn as much as you can, in college, out of college, without college. I don't necessarily believe that college is necessary. I believe
I
experience is necessary.
100%.
Um, but I think getting those early experiences and working extremely hard
Hmm.
early on
Hmm.
and getting as many licks in early on allows you to then maybe have a little bit higher risk tolerance, maybe have a little bit more information on somebody else's dime, right?
Hmm.
Because you
Yeah.
worked for them, you didn't have to make the payroll.
Right.
Um,
Right. Exactly.
but do it early, right?
Hmm.
Because it doesn't mean you can't do it often, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you can't start another business and another business and another business, and it doesn't mean your business isn't going to fail, right?
Hmm.
And in failures, big and small, I think that's where we learn a ton,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my
And
gosh, I think failure
um,
is the biggest teacher. I mean, it
yeah,
was it was kind of weird to have this thought jump into my head a couple of months ago, but
yeah,
I had I did actively have this thought and I thought, wow, that's kind of strange. But everything was going in my life was going so great. Like I was
yeah,
happy like across the board. And I am a
yeah,
very naturally optimistic person. Like I live
sure,
in a constant state of delusion and I'm totally
hmm,
okay with that. I
yeah,
I have always been an optimist. I've always found the silver lining, but I did have this
hmm,
moment where I was like, wow, everything's going really well. Is there
yes,
something bad that's going to come along? Like, what lesson am
yes,
I about to learn? Because I feel like
hmm,
something's brewing.
oh
But then
yeah.
I did think also, I said, well, whatever it is, you always learn more from the hard times than from the good times. So,
Absolutely. And I think, one other thing, just looking back, we give out books to our staff and to some of our vendors. One thing that I think helped personally and professionally for us was, and it sounds super simple, but it was Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace
oh, uh-huh.
book. Um, Now, I'll caveat that with saying being debt averse sometimes doesn't allow you to grow as fast,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But the converse to that is being debt averse also allows you to weather storms,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That maybe you can't when you're leveraged. And so, that kind of having a pretty deep knowledge of where we're at financially and the next few moves we're going to make and how that money is going to be implemented and
Mm-hmm.
why we're doing it that way and setting some limits on growth
Mm-hmm.
have been hugely helpful for us as a business. But I think both in employee retention, but also in creating a culture where people understand that they have a job, they're going to have a job, and the
Mm-hmm.
future looks bright,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when hard times come, they know that you've already planned for them, and that really gives a ton of confidence in your employees. Now,
Yeah.
can't do that when you have no money, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I look back when I was in a Cutlass Supreme with I couldn't even fit my tools,
Uh-huh.
in the back of the car, and then I had to trade that in for $100 literally to buy a truck
Uh-huh.
that I could barely afford because I couldn't afford the taxes.
Oh God.
You look at all of those things, right? I
Yeah.
needed the
Yeah.
write off on the truck, but so I basically gave away a car that I couldn't use, and um, you look back and you laugh and you go, hey, that's what made me maybe have an appreciation for it. But when you do have the opportunity, if you can provide security and surety for your staff, I think it's an awesome thing.
Hmm. Well, I mean, having a solid, consistent pipeline of business has got to be assuring for the team as well when you're, feeling like I mean, do you guys have to spend a lot of money on marketing, or do you feel like you get a lot of referrals and word of mouth traffic?
Sure. Sure. We get a ton of referrals and word of mouth. So early on in our business, when we first started, we really hit Yelp at the time.
Hmm.
This was 10 years ago,
Hmm.
and went from being a nobody to being the number one rated in 18 months.
Oh, wow.
And that
Awesome.
set a trajectory
Hmm.
for our business that we couldn't have done in 10 years of referrals, right?
Hmm.
You just couldn't, right? We started leveraging the tools that are available today,
Yeah.
and we've continued to do that. What we found, though, especially in the last several years, is everybody's kind of figured out the secret sauce there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, reviews and customer experience have become a huge part of most businesses.
Yeah.
And so it's constant iteration. I think before we started our call, I was talking with our customer service manager saying, hey, if we put A-frames behind your truck every time you stopped, and that A-frame had a QR code, do you think more people would be interested in getting a lead? Hey, how can we wrap your vehicle to look different? Because we were the first fence company to wrap our vehicles in
Okay.
our geography.
Uh-huh.
And we did it matte black with just white lettering. So it really kind of stood out.
Stood out. Yeah.
Uh, Now several of our competitors are wrapping their vehicles. So we've lost that competitive advantage. Right? And so
Okay.
now we're saying, okay, constantly looking at that next iteration. I think you can't rest on your laurels, right?
Yeah.
As especially in contracting, right? Because
Hmm.
the market changes so fast, right?
Yeah.
There's always a new toy, there's always a new way of doing things. I think if we keep the fundamentals the same and use a few metrics to judge,
Hmm.
what we're doing, we can. But this last year, print media has actually, that pendulum has swung to where it wasn't effective, and now it's super effective,
Oh, interesting.
um, for us, because we call it track, right? We track all of our advertisements,
Yeah.
and so media that we tested, we've kind of stuck our toe in the water the last 4 or 5 years and said, okay,
Hmm.
let's run print ads in magazines. It wasn't great, right? Kind of broke even proposition. Well, the last 4 months of this, 2024, it's had its best returns ever had. Way
Really
more than pay per click, way more than LSAs or any type of other online media.
interesting. That's
Yeah, and I'm not sure
fascinating.
why.
I know that's what I was just gonna say. Like, it's so funny because sometimes you see these different things that like things come full circle, right? It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
people
yeah.
didn't want this and now they want it again. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like that
Mm-hmm.
is so crazy. Because I was thinking to
No, and
myself, it's funny that you said it too, because I was just at Target the other day and I was in line to check out and I saw all of the magazines and I
mhm.
laughed to myself thinking like, who still buys magazines?
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously people do because there's an abundance of magazines,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh
so it's
yeah,
like, that's so interesting because I would feel like anything that's in a magazine would be, unless it's like a specific interview, but
sure.
any sort of pop culture or sports
Mm-hmm.
type news, you can get
Yeah,
that immediately on your phone.
sure, sure.
So interesting.
Yeah, and I think we also have to look at our clientele, right? So
Hmm.
our average, we have to look at for our business, right? And
Hmm.
I guess it comes down to understanding your customers,
Yeah.
their demographics, right? And
Hmm.
I think people who own their homes, who make a certain amount of money, are typically a certain age bracket, right?
Hmm.
And so I think there's also right. I don't know why, but maybe there's a nostalgia for
Yeah.
print media right now, where people say, "Hey, I'm tired of social media. I'm
Yeah.
tired of the 3 to 8 second next, next, next."
Oh my
Not to say
gosh.
that it's not highly
Yeah.
effective, because it is for other demographics for us, especially on the metal fence post company.
Hmm.
You want to talk about getting the word out quickly and throughout the entire country. Social media is awesome,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
But localized, where you actually feel like you're part of the community. Maybe right now, print ads in magazines that are specific to the Sacramento area,
Sure.
feels like you're in the community again, right? And
Hmm.
so we're able to kind of take the gas off of the pay per click.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Yeah,
Well, this
yeah,
has been
interesting.
such an enjoyable conversation. I feel like I've learned
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much about just not only efficiency in business, but also fencing. So Thank you for all of that. Thank
I'm
you for your
sorry.
time.
Absolutely.
Is there
Well,
any sort of like website or social handle you want to share and leave behind?
so on the Classic Fence side, it's just classicfence.com, and
Okay.
on the Z Post side, it's metalfencepost.com.
That's very easy. I'll put both of those in the caption for
Yeah.
sure.
I I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thanks again so
Well,
much. And we'll talk soon.
absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Nikki. Have a good one. See ya.